Hey guys, what's going on? This is Mons here. Welcome for another episode of Mons and More. We've got a little bit of a sports theme setup going on today. Today's basically going to be about football, all right? Specifically, the NFL with the NFL draft coming up and free agency. There have been some crazy trades that have been made, and then obviously there's been some rebranding. Before any of that, I just want to start. Got my Guardians gear on. I got my thermal, my hat, my little fun football thrown around. I just want to give a tribute to the XFL. A lot of people think it was going to be a joke. It was good in the 5 weeks that they were there. It was a lot of good, solid football. Most importantly, what a lot of people I think have to, I just want to give a little tribute to it to say, a lot of people have to respect the league and the players for what it did. It did its purpose. It gave players that were not in the NFL an opportunity to basically have an outlet to be seen of their abilities. And I'll get into that with basically the face of the league, in my opinion, based on what his skill was he did in the short time. But it was definitely a good thing. So being in the New York area, I'm the Guardians guy. But hopefully we see them back. Who knows when? But with everything that's going on right now, I'm not sure about that. So now let's get over to the NFL. Like I said, the NFL, I gotta pull this up here. I do apologize. So like I said, at this point we're roughly about a week away from the draft. Prior to that, I've been thinking about everything with free agency. I've been waiting for. And it kind of came in and popped, and everybody knew exactly what was going on with free agency real quick. And then some stuff kind of simmered out. There's still a few players that we're just kind of waiting on at this point to see what's going on with them, but there are some speculations. So I'm just going to recap them, so this way, piece by piece on here, we know, and put my thoughts in here. I'd be curious to hear yours in the end when all is said and done on here. Before I get into it, let's just start with some of the team brand changes on here, okay? Now, the Tampa Bay Bucks, all right, they put out that they had new uniforms. By no means are these uniforms new. They are actually just bringing back previous uniforms. I'm not going to say old uniforms because these uniforms aren't old, but they are they are the previous generation. So I want to say at this point to probably about 15, 18 years when they first branded into the current logo and everything, when they had Warren Sapp on the team with the red, the orange, the pewter, the big pirate ship at Raymond James Stadium. That's when they came out with these uniforms. So they're just going back to them. I think with the uniforms they've had for the past few years, it was a little too out there and it wasn't working for them. These uniforms that they're going back to, I actually do like these uniforms, and I did like them then. Prior to these uniforms, I had never heard the word pewter, and it was just something very fun to say. I enjoy saying it now. I'll say it again. Pewter. So, no, these uniforms are good. So that's on here. Let's see. The next ones are the Rams. Now, the Rams unveiled a new logo, which is highly boring. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a bunch of shapes. Doesn't really make too much sense. The colors, a little bit different. It looks like they tried to take the shapes of what the Chargers had in the lightning bolt and just shift it into a ram or something. There's really not much there going on. I don't know. Uniform-wise, nothing has been disclosed or shown in what uniforms are gonna look like. So that we still have to kind of wait on. I'd be curious to see what they look like, but I'm sure they're probably going to be better than what we saw last season, especially with the tremendous difference in the logo. The Falcons are the clear-cut winner here, okay? So I made the note on here, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Now, obviously, I'm a PUBG guy, so that's where I got that from. But, yeah, if you look at the uniforms, it's just kind of like, I would say it's a mixture of next generation NFL uniform with a splash of getting some ideas from XFL or maybe even some college ideas on there in terms of what they did. They've got 4 uniforms. There's a white one, there is a black one, and then there is a black, like it's a black fading into red. So that one, that's probably going to be some sort of alternate, I'd imagine. And then there was a fourth one I saw in the image. It's hard to tell exactly what it is because it's like the furthest one, or should I say, like in your case, it's the furthest one like in the backdrop, and it's like on an angle. So I can't tell if it's like supposed to be like a retro uniform with the modern look. It's hard to tell. But there were two whites, the black, and then the black fade to red. So that was definitely the best looking uniform cluster of everything that they had sent here. Got to keep opening up the iPad. And then we got two more. So the Browns, they just announced the other day that they were having new uniforms. There's nothing new about it. There's absolutely nothing new about it. It's the same uniforms that they had from 6 years ago, and it's the same uniforms that they had from 35 and 40 years ago. It's a waste of marketing just to put out a hype video. I don't understand what they're doing. I'm completely clueless. I don't know what's going on. It was a waste of excitement. You did nothing for me or anything else out there. You're just kind of doing something for people to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Like, there's other things that we can talk about the Cleveland Browns for. Like, who are you going to pick? Are you going to make some trades? What are you going to do in the draft? I don't need to talk about your uniforms, your pants, and your shirt. It's pointless. Come up with a decent logo. Your logo is your helmet. I don't understand it. Like, create some other issues to talk about. I'm sorry, that's me being frustrated. And then the other one is the lame attempt by the Indianapolis Colts with their new uniforms as well. There's nothing new. There's more new than what the Browns have new, but the Colts really, for knowing the historic uniform of what the Colts have, the Colts really didn't do anything new. They changed the font style of the numbers on the jersey, okay? For the horseshoe, in the horseshoe itself, and the grommets, which are basically the dotted circles in the horseshoe, I think they changed the number of grommets in the horseshoe. Very, very, very minor tweaks. If you're not a detailed person, if you've never been to a football game before, or you've seen just, one or two casually and you're seeing it again now, you're looking at it, you're not even what they do. I actually had to watch a 5-minute video to actually see what was done because I couldn't see it myself. I was like, seriously, like, this is what they publicized? But I'd rather watch something than that and be let down than to watch the Browns hype video and say, oh, you're just bringing back videos for uniforms from 30 years ago, and be let down that way. That was me. So in this case, like I said, the Browns are the Falcons are the clear-cut winner in regards to the new uniforms in the offseason. The Bucs, those are nice uniforms, so I'm looking forward to that. Especially, it's going to be weird seeing Tom Brady in a Bucs uniform. We'll get to that a little bit later. Jumping the gun. And then I think, regardless of what the Rams uniforms look like, I'd have to say they're going to be number 3 on there. So that's that. Let's just jump ahead a little bit, get into the next category. There were some trades. There weren't too many. There were 1, 2, 3, 4. There were about 4 or 5 trades that were concerning notable trades. Now going through here, generally in regards to what I'm going to be talking about with the trades and free agency, I focus on obviously the skill positions. So we're talking about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. If it's a big all-star name player on defense, something like that, then maybe I'll be talking about it on that side of it. But it's mainly going to be the main prime skill positions. So for the Texans never seem to let us down when it comes to trades. We're always scratching our head. They traded DeAndre Hopkins, their number 1 wide receiver, and realistically he might be, some would argue, the number 1 receiver in the league. That might be a stretch. I think it's definitely fair to say he's probably a top 3 wide receiver in the league. So the Texans traded him to the Cardinals in return for David Johnson. I just don't understand this. I don't understand this at all. I'm not going to try to figure it out because supposedly there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama about Bill O'Brien and him not getting along. So that was basically what had coursed the trade to happen. So it's not a matter of player ability. It wasn't a matter of contract. It was just behind the scenes. I don't like you, and I have the control to get rid of you. Whatever. But with David Johnson, it just, of anything you could do, I would say, and I'm trying to open this up again here. I do apologize. If anything, try to get some draft picks, I would think, because again, David Johnson, he's had what I want to say like the past 3 years. You figure this year he was out about 80% of the year. I forget what his injury was that they had to trade for. I think it was Drake Carrion or whatever. And then he's had some disappointing years the past few years. So wasn't really a balanced trade. It made no sense. The other trade that the Texans did was they traded with the Rams to get Brandon Cooks. So now obviously you see that, okay, well, we trade away a receiver and now we got to get some sort of caliber receiver to basically fill back that slot. So by getting him, you'd have to assume the depth chart would look like Brandon Cooks as your number 1, Will Fuller the 5th as your number 2. And I would think somewhere in there, supposedly this draft is so wide receiver heavy. That's the main thing that they keep talking about. I would imagine they would probably select a wide receiver in there just because the verdict over the past 2 seasons, I want to say, with Cooks, you figure he got traded out of New England. He had a shortcoming there. And then he basically had 2 seasons with the Rams, so his past 3 years. He had 1 really good year with the Rams, and then this past season wasn't all that great. And then out. So you figure 2 of the past 3 years, he hasn't been that great. So I would say if he doesn't have a good year, he could probably get cut or traded. Again, I don't know if it's a contract year for him or what. But, so that's on there. And that's pretty much all in regards to trades for the Texans. And they did a trade last year that didn't really make too much sense in regards to Kenny Stills. So, again, I have my opinion on that one. Moving over to the Vikings. Now we've got a trade that already occurred and a trade that is in the rumor mill right now. So the one that occurred, we are looking at, and I'm sorry for looking down. I got a long list of notes on here, a lot of things I want to address and talk about. So I'm going to take a punch down and then try to come back up to you. They traded Stefon Diggs to the Bills for... Now this is what Buffalo gave up. Buffalo gave up this year's number 1. I'm sorry, the Bills gave up their 1st round pick, the 5th round pick, and their 6th round pick this year, and then their 4th round pick next year for Stefon Diggs. Now, I want to say Minnesota won this trade. Minnesota absolutely won this trade. Now, I get what they want to do is, it's kind of iffy. Now, I'm not a Bills fan. So I probably should have looked at the depth chart to kind of criticize this more or to know better. But for what they have in their quarterback up there, he seemed pretty solid. He's doing pretty good. And I wouldn't be surprised if, again, for me to say this, I'm a Jets fan. All right. Now, who knows what's going to happen with the Patriots this year. We still got to see some things. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Bills win the division possibly, or at least go into the wild card this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're doing things in the right direction. They got a good quarterback up there. Their head coach is doing some good stuff. Okay, so it makes sense of it. So now they're getting him a solid receiver. He's not that solid. He's not worth 4 picks. He's not. He's not at all by any means. I think Buffalo overpaid for him. Minnesota won this because realistically, Minnesota, you'd have to say Adam Thielen is definitely their number 1. Stefon Diggs is their number 2. I don't really know if you could go on. There may be, at most, maybe 5 teams in the NFL where you could put Stephon Diggs on that team and he would be the number 1 receiver. That would be, if you think I'm wrong with that, put me in the notes, tell me on which you think, oh yeah, he's definitely, and where he would fit in there. Like, the Jets really aren't that good, so yeah, he'd be a number 1 on the Jets, but like, on Minnesota he wasn't, on Kansas City, there'd be a bunch of teams. He would not be a number 1 receiver by any means. He's definitely number 2. So they definitely overpaid for him. So while we're talking about wide receivers, in the rumor mill that just started popping up, I think it was about 2 days ago, apparently Minnesota has been speaking with the Browns on trading for Odell Beckham Jr. Now, he's still got some money there, so I wouldn't be surprised, if Minnesota's going to try to trade for him, because it's a big contract. You say, okay, maybe like a 3 and a 5, a 3 and a 4, or maybe like a 3 and a 5 this year, or a 4 or a 5. I think it would be like a mid-level picks plus 2 mid-level picks this year, or maybe 1 next year. The talent's there, but it's just contract heavy, and he's toxic. But to put Odell Beckham Jr. next to Adam Thielen for Kirk Cousins, that would elevate Kirk Cousins. I could definitely see something like that happening. That would be interesting, but again, who knows? That's just in the rumor mill. And again, Odell Beckham Jr., he dropped off this year because, again, everybody thought that Landry, his stock was going to go down because he was next to Odell Beckham Jr. Well, Odell Beckham Jr., he was the number 1. Jarvis Landry was the number 2. However, if you can't throw to your number 1, you throw to your number 2. And Jarvis Landry, he ate up everything this year. I remember in fantasy football, nobody wanted to touch Landry because they thought that he was going to tank. He was going to do anything. I scooped him up late round. He was good. And he had a good year. He's definitely deserving to be the number 1. And it looks like he's going to stay there, and they want to keep him. Now, this is a silly trade. The Jaguars, this is what people were talking about. When you were getting towards the end of the season, because Nick Foles, he broke his collarbone. I think it was his left one. He broke his collarbone, and then they brought in Minshew Magic. Minshew, he actually did pretty good. A lot of people were surprised. He still got some development. To further himself, but for what he is and what we saw, for a kid to come out of nowhere and do what he did, you have to be okay with that. So Nick Foles goes, he's basically a current day journeyman. He's now over with Chicago. So the second this happened, I knew right off the bat. Well, they traded. They didn't trade. What did they do? They drafted Mitch Biscuits. They drafted Trubisky 3 years ago. I think this is his final year on his rookie contract. I think. So they drafted him, and he's been starting ever since they drafted him. And now you're trading to bring over Foles. All right. So the question is, by no means is one of those quarterbacks more spectacular than the other. There's no clear cut. Biscuits is better than Foles. It's definitely not a statement to say Foles is better than Biscuits. That's going to be a quarterback competition all camp long. And regardless, whoever wins the starting job, they're going to have a very short leash to say, okay, you've had your chance, too many turnovers, we've lost 2-3 in a row. Because literally, you start the season 0-3, that can be your season right there. That can be your season right there. So there's going to be a very short leash, whoever wins that starting job, before they get benched, and then that number 2 comes in, whoever it is. I think it's a silly trade. It's not silly for Jacksonville because apparently they believe that they've got their quarterback. So they're set. They got something out of it. They're good. But it is what it is. So now we're going to get down to the signings. Okay. I got them separated piece by piece on here. Some notes on here listed. Some notes I'm just going to make up on the whim as we go talking about this. Now, in regards to signings, the number one, the most important one, Tom Brady with the Bucks. It makes sense, I guess. A lot of people say when you're going to leave somewhere, perfect example. Now, again, a lot of people know I'm not a LeBron fan. But when you think about what he did when he left his spot, he said he wanted to go down to Miami where it was warm, right? Or what do people do? Or they want to go to a warmer climate, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. So usually in those instances, it's either down to Miami or you're going out to LA. In this case here, I think it was like week 15 or 16, he had sold his Boston house, and the red flags were going out at that point. He signed down with Tampa. Some serious stuff is going on down in Tampa. Now he's got some. He's got two. What is it? I forget what the stats and the numbers were. But you figure for his receivers on there, he's got two receivers that are both 1,000-yard receivers. You figure you got his quarterback, which is I believe Cameron Brate down there. No, it's not Brate. I forget who it is. I'm going blank. I'm sorry. I'm going blank right now. That's who it used to be. But the quarterback, the tight end, is decent down there. Running back is a little bit of a gray area. I'll kind of touch back on that a little bit. But it's going to be interesting now because you figure he's in a division that is pure competition. You figure 2 times a year you get to see him go against Drew Brees. 2 times a year you get to see him go against Matt Ryan. Okay, so that's basically Super Bowl rematches twice a year from when he went against the Falcons and came back and won that. And then you figure the other team would be Carolina, which I would expect Carolina to be finishing 4th in a division this year. 3rd or 4th. I would think either Tampa Bay or New Orleans are going to be the 1 and 2. But again, we'll get back to Carolina in a minute. Let's see. The Vikings, I just gave when I was talking about their trades, they extended Kirk Cousins. It was a quick 3 years, and now here we are again. They did an extension with them. I forget the details of the contract. I don't know if it was a 2-year or a 3-year extension. I don't know if it's a matter of just because that they believe in him and he's their guy. There aren't many options out there, which I wouldn't say is true. Because, again, I got some notes on there in terms of there's a bunch of quarterbacks that are kind of in a limbo right now. That, either they're backups just because there's nothing out there, kind of, all right, we want to trade them, get rid of them. In the draft, there were really only 2 or 3 quarterbacks that originally were focused. And now as we're going on piece by piece on there, they're saying that realistically there are about like 5 or 6 solid quarterbacks. So I guess it depends on who you ask and the scouting and stuff like that. I don't follow college all too much just because there's so much to it. But once we get towards like the end of the season and obviously the drafting and the mock drafts, I kind of tune in and hone in on the details and report some more. So that's what's going on right now. All right, so next with the Cowboys. Now currently, the main thing with them is they did the franchise tag on Dak Prescott. He wanted a big contract. Supposedly, they were extremely far apart. They weren't even close. I think he wanted, I forget what it was. I think he said he wanted something stupid. I forget the number. I want to think I heard a number. Like, he had wanted something like 36, 37 million a year or something like that. And I think Dallas was offering like 27 or like 28. They were super far apart. So they franchised it. He still hasn't signed the franchise tag. I know Dallas, they still want to work and try to get an actual deal to get rid of this franchise tag since he hasn't signed it yet. I know that's what's going on. But there's some stuff going on there. And then another thing on here too was they did extend their number 1 wide receiver in Amari Cooper. Now Now, again, you kind of have to do it. That's your big three right there. You figure between Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and then last year they locked up Zeke, which you see right over here on my left side. So those three, you definitely got to keep those three together. Interesting little fact about it. Now, I'd be curious to know more details, but I did hear a little piece of information that Amari Cooper, he had turned down whatever, I forget the details of his contract with Dallas, right? So let's just say this is his contract. The Redskins had offered him an additional $10 million, and he turned it down. He wanted to basically stay and sign with Dallas and stay there. So, with these athletes, $10 million is a lot of money. Now, depending on the contract, whether it's a 3 or 4 year, that could be anywhere from 2.5 to 3.3 million a year, depending on the terms of the contract. But I got a feeling it's probably just the franchise themselves. You don't have to be a fan of the Cowboys. I get there are a lot of people that hate the Cowboys, just like I'm not a fan of the Patriots. But as a franchise, the way they're run, regardless of your opinion of certain people behind the scenes, I would say they're a pretty good run franchise. Now, again, whether that's the franchise themselves or just have the connection he has to want to keep that core with the players together, that's obviously all together on him. Going down now to the Saints. Now, the Saints, we got three pieces here. Now, his contract was up at the end of this year. Drew Brees, we're talking about. We're going to start with him. He had signed a 2-year, $50 million contract. His first year was 1 year. The first year was $27 million, and then this second season, which just ended, it was a $23 million. So it was averaging $25 per year. That was over. He took some time. He didn't know if he was going to come back or not. He did extend it for another 2 years, and I think it's the same thing. I think it's another 2-year, $50 million contract. And it just actually came out. What is today? Today's Thursday. I think it came out last Friday. So it's under less than a week. It's definitely been less than a week. He's already signed a contract with, I want to say NBC? It's either NBC or ABC. I always confuse those two, even for regular shows. But he's already signed a contract with one of the stations. So when he retired from football, he's already got a broadcasting job. So he's basically already set up. So that's going to be something to see there. So you figure they signed Drew Brees, and they did extend Taysom Hill. Now, he's very fun to watch. Now, again, up here in New York, we don't get to see him too much, but like when they do prime time with the Saints, he is very fun to watch. Whether you're seeing him run the ball, pass the ball, catch the ball, punt returns, kick, it's all fun. He's very fun to watch for a person that you had never heard of. I really enjoy watching the Saints just because of him. Even if you go back prior years, because of Kamara and Ingram and all of these. So the Saints are a good team. And another addition they had made was they signed wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders. I think in the right team, I think he's going to pop back up this year. You figure when he was with Denver, you figure you had him. He was a number 2 behind Demaryius Thomas during the Peyton days. And then once Peyton was gone, then they both kind of fizzled out because they didn't have that prime time quarterback. So you figure Emmanuel Sanders, he was on Denver. He was traded to San Francisco towards the end of last season. Again, San Francisco, I thought he was going to help the passing game out there. Garoppolo, I don't know, I'm not going to say it's Garoppolo or if it's the offense, but he didn't really do much. A few weeks went by, I actually forgot he was even on the team, that they made the trade for him. We were watching the Super Bowl. I think he was, I only saw him come up on TV maybe once or twice. So I think coming to a team now where I'd imagine he's probably going to be the number 2 receiver. I don't know if there's somebody else above him where maybe he'd be a number 3. But I'd figure he'll probably be a number 2. I think he's going to have an elevated year. I think this will be a good fit for him to kind of come back up. Now we're going to the Panthers. This is probably the one that I'm most excited to talk about. And let me tell you here's why, okay? There's a bunch of stuff. There's been drama here, all right? So let's recap to the season. At the beginning of the season, I think it was a foot injury, which kept Cam Newton out all year last year. Or I don't know, no, I think he played like 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks, it was kind of and then he just said, no, they were being precautious, have him checked out about it. So there was, whoever his backup was, it was like Kyle something. I never heard of the guy. I don't know if he was a rookie or what the case would be. Regardless, again, for a no-name guy to kind of step into that role and run the team the rest of the season as the starter, he did a pretty decent, solid job. So I want to applaud him for that, despite the fact I can't remember his name. That's number one. Number two, season's over. Okay. Still trying to figure out what's going on with Cam. Does he need surgery? Is he not healing properly? What's going on? Oh well, we'll figure it out. So what happens? Free agency hits. The Panthers, they signed Teddy Bridgewater. It's a little bit of a wow because, well, you have Cam Newton. Cam Newton's definitely your number one, right? And now you have this Kyle guy, whoever he is, he's your number two. So it doesn't make so now it starts to become a concerning factor. Like, whoa. So within about 2 or 3 days, there's some drama going around that Cam Newton, he threw a little hissy fit on Twitter, saying about he didn't want to be traded or anything. I don't know, but it turned into something. And he's still basically on the roster, but at this point he's a number 3. And it's just a matter of trying to find a trade partner. Oh, and then what happens? Yeah, I want to say maybe like a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, I think it was, a quarterback by the name of P.J. Walker. Now, he was the starting quarterback for the Houston Roughnecks in the XFL, okay? Like I had said at the start of the video in regards to, the XFL achieving for some players and being appreciative, in my opinion, he was the league, whether you want to say if at the end of 5 weeks the season's over, he was your league MVP. I think he still would have been on projection to be the league MVP. Now check this out. Let me just read some stats to you here, okay? For P.J. Walker, through 5 games in the XFL, he had passed for 1,338 yards, so he was the leading passer. He had 15 touchdowns, which were passing. He was leading in passing, and 4 interceptions. He had passed for 2. Okay, so in a full, if they had played out the season, you figure a full 10-week schedule. He probably would have thrown for roughly around 2,700 yards, about 30 touchdowns, give or take a little bit, and you figure about 7 or 8 interceptions is what he would have had. So that's a pretty good season. Now you figure, okay, keep in mind they're signing him as at this point you figure, well, Cam Newton, he's not still on the roster, but he's basically your number 3. Well, now you're bringing this guy in. So technically, we'll say because he's XFL, he's not NFL. Let's just hold some kind of question marks over the guy, just because of whatever the case may be, right? Let's put him as a 3. Realistically, I think I'd say probably put him at 2, Teddy Bridgewater at the 1. Realistically, I think they'll wind up fighting out for it. But I'm going to get to that in a second. If you were to have him start a full 16-game season, because this year's going to be 16, and next year they're starting 17, potentially he could pass for about 4,200 yards, about 30 to 35 touchdowns. The way he is as a quarterback, if you look at like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and things like that, you could easily see him for running for about 700-800 yards and rushing for like 5 or 6. So this guy could be a super explosive quarterback or player or athlete, however you want to put it out there, if he was basically going to be your starter for basically a full season. So this, like I said before about Chicago with Foles and Trubisky, I think in this case with the Panthers, this would be the same situation here. I think realistically, Bridgewater going in, Bridgewater is probably going to be on there as your one. Walker is going to be on your roster probably as your 2, maybe 3. And then that other Kyle guy, again, you could, depending on how your scouting report is, again, you could say, okay, well, because of what he did last year, he could potentially be the 2 or the 3. Realistically, I think P.J. Walker, all 3 of those quarterbacks, however you want to set up that depth chart for the Panthers, I think there's going to be the same thing where it's going to be a very short leash. And I think, if they fall apart where they say, hey, you know what, we're in the hole, we're not winning the division, we're not going to make it to the playoffs, I can see them saying, you know what, put the kid in and see what he's got. I can realistically see that happening and seeing him blow up. So I got super excited the day that I heard this. And then the other thing on here too, people have a certain feeling about it. I really don't care. And again, that throws people off because I'm a Jets fan. Robbie Anderson, he was our number 1 receiver. Regardless, but he signed with the Panthers as well. So he's over there, and he's most likely going to be the wide receiver number 2 behind DJ Moore. So that's probably what it is on that side now. I spent a lot of time on the Panthers right there. I'm sorry. It's just they had a good storyline on there, and then obviously if you've been following it, they didn't sign Christian McCaffrey, but they extended him big money and big news the past couple days. The Seahawks, they signed Greg Olsen. So it's kind of a funny follow-up. He transitioning out of the Panthers. He left Carolina, and he was actually doing commentating for the XFL in the offseason. But you figure Greg Olsen going up to Seattle, I think that's going to be a really good fit. You figure all around, that's a well-balanced offense now. That's just one more piece that they were kind of iffy on. You figure you got Russell Wilson at quarterback. You've got DK Metcalf is probably maybe your wide receiver 1, all right? And then you got Lockett as your wide receiver 2, and you got Chris Carson as basically your main running back. And then you figure previously you had Will Dissly as your tight end. He's now going to be your tight end 2, and then you figure you're going to have Olsen in there as your number 1 tight end. So as long as he can stay healthy, because unfortunately he's had foot issues. I think it was his left foot. He had foot surgery with some fractures and stuff a few years back. If he can stay healthy, that's gonna be a good team. That's gonna be a very interesting NFC West. The Bears, Jimmy Graham, another tight end. He signed over there. It should be a good fit, but here's the problem. Ever since Jimmy Graham left the Saints, he's been he hasn't been a shell of himself. You figure I want to say he got traded, I believe it was. I don't think it was free agency. I think he got traded up to Seattle. He didn't really do too great up in Seattle. He was up there for, I want to say it was 4 years, at least 3 if not 4 years. He was kind of under par up there. So again, I don't know if it was an offense. He wasn't utilized right compared to the way it was in New Orleans, but he just didn't click well. So he walked out free agency. He signed over to Green Bay. Green Bay, I think he was with them for, I want to say 2 years. I don't think it was 3. I think it was 2 years. And you figure, okay, Aaron Rodgers, he's probably going to maximize this. You figure generally they don't really have good tight ends. So to have that sort of tight end where he used to basically almost be like a really big, thick wide receiver, like Gronkowski was and stuff like that. And he wasn't utilized up there. It didn't work out for him. So they don't have too many crazy weapons in Chicago, and people are going to come at me for that. That's fine. But again, between that and then kind of knowing you've got an iffy quarterback, regardless of which quarterback it is, I think, Chicago, you're probably looking at like a 5-11 year. I don't see much out of Chicago this year. The Raiders, I didn't understand this one. Now, if you look at the Raiders, okay, the first thing that was reported was they signed Marcus Mariota. All right, well, I guess that's better than whoever your backup quarterback was before, because I don't know who their backup quarterback was before. But Marcus Mariota, that's like a pretty decent name to go from a starter to, having basically realized, all right, you're coming in here probably to be a backup. I don't think they're gonna sit Derek Carr unless it's something severe. Now, again, what does Gruden want to do? Well, we shall find out and see. I think this is the last year of Derek Carr's deal, so being in a contract year, he's going to have some heat on him, but we'll see. The other thing that they did too was they signed Jason Witten. So it's kind of one of those things that surprised me because Witten, he retired. He was in the booth for a year. I think it was on ESPN. I think it was Monday Night Football. And then he comes back to play for the Cowboys. And I guess it was a 1-year deal. I think it was like 1 year, $4 million or something like that. Or unless I'm thinking about the current deal. I don't know. But you're a free agent, and now you walk away from that team to go to a different team, which is now going to be Las Vegas. I'm just surprised that he didn't just retire again officially instead of wanting to keep playing and just go to a different team. That surprised me. That didn't make any sense. Let's see. Here we go. Where are we going? All right, we were just talking about Mariota, so we're going to go to his former team, the Titans. They extended Tannehill. Tannehill got big money. I think, oh my God, what was it? I know it was like a 4-year contract. I want to think it was like somewhere in the range of like oh my God. I'm thinking $60 million, but I know that's not it because that's $15 million a year. That's a very small deal for what he just did for them. I can't remember, but it was a big deal that they did what they did for him, especially when there were rumors saying that they were going after Tom Brady. So the fact that they locked him up like a week and a half, 2 weeks before was like, oh wow, like they're not even trying to pursue Brady. So that was on there. Now we're going down. The Browns, they did some stuff, so they've, they signed Case Keenum. Case Keenum, I've always liked him as a quarterback. Now, when he was still in college at Houston, I know people that followed college that were saying he was crazy. And for what he did with Minnesota a few years back, he earned the right to be a starter. Now, a lot of people don't say that or agree with that, but think of some other starters in this league. And then for what he's done, he has the right to do that. And then the other thing they did too was they signed Austin Hooper out of free agency from Atlanta. Now, he's always kind of been and you figure this past season, he really spiked up and he had a very productive year. So I guess they don't believe in Njoku having productivity being their number one receiver, that they went out and grabbed someone like Austin Hooper. So we'll see how that helps them out. Now we're getting into some controversial stuff coming down the stretch here, okay? The Colts, if you were following it, you're going to know right off the bat, okay, we're talking about Phillip Rivers here. This has got to be the stupidest signing of offseason, of the free agency. This is the stupidest signing. This was the worst move that any of the teams did. Any of them. Now, keep in mind, your starter was Jacoby Brissett. Now, you figure, this is probably, if I had to guess, maybe his 4th, 5th year in the league, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. So he was your starter. He is now basically going to be the number 2, I would imagine. But Phillip Rivers is, I want to say, 38? 39. He's under 40, but he's up there. Why are you signing him to a 1-year, $25 million deal? It's not like years back when the Broncos, they signed Peyton for 4 years, and they were saying, okay, well, we're going hard all 4 years, or the first year we're going to gauge it and then go hard the next 3. Like 1 year, what are you going to get out of him for 1 year? Because that team's not going to win a championship. That's not a championship. That's not the Patriots, and you're blocking in a quarterback to try to do that. I just don't understand the signing. You know, when I was making my notes on here, this kind of made me think about when Adam Gase, my Jets dumbass head coach, when Adam Gase was the head coach of the Dolphins, when he went after Jay Cutler and signed him out of retirement. Like, what's the point? You're just throwing the season and you're throwing money away. Now, again, Phillip Rivers, we know what he's done his entire career with San Diego. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm just saying at his age, this late, you know, if it was maybe a 2-year or even a 3-year contract, okay, you're planning a period of time to go forward with him. 1 year, I don't understand what the point is. It's just a waste of money. That's my opinion. The Texans, were back to them. They signed Randall Cobb. He was a free agent this past season. He was previously with Dallas. He was the number 3 in Dallas. Coming in, he's now going to be the number 3 in Houston. Like I said, at best, the number 3, because you got to figure they got Brandon Cooks as the 1, Will Fuller as the 2. And then him, and then who knows whatever else is going to happen. He could slide, but at best he's going to be the 3. Some tricky things happened on here. Now, the Falcons, they signed Todd Gurley after the Falcons released Devontae Freeman. It doesn't surprise me that they released Todd Gurley. I think it was more of a health issue, which kind of started to kick in at the end of 2018, because you figure towards the end of that season, it was a matter of they were, you could kind of say, play count on him, and that's where they kind of faded off towards the end of the season, and they were getting by in the playoffs, and when it came to the Super Bowl with the Patriots, they went stale. He wasn't even there. I think in that Super Bowl, I think he only played like 5 or 6 plays. So that was a health issue in which why they got rid of him. And then you figure the Chargers, I knew this was coming. Everybody knew this was coming. They released Melvin Gordon. Now, they did this backwards, okay? The Chargers, they extended Austin Eckler. As soon as I saw that the Chargers were extending him, because whenever he's had to play for Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, he's put up big numbers. He's always, has 20, 25 touches a game, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. He always has big games when he's starting in place of Gordon. So once the fact that I saw that they were extending him, I knew, all right, the intention, they're going to cut Gordon. Gordon, he did say he had a few offers out there. He turned them down, and specifically, he signed with the Broncos just because he wanted to play the Chargers twice a year. Like, that's child. It's hysterical and it's childish. It's funny. So that was that. So that's getting through all of the main free agency notables. All right, like I said, all the skill positions and players and some of that drama in between there. The notables on here, there aren't many, but just to kind of recap them, just because, again, it's a matter of they're still a factor. That does have to be addressed. You figure, now when? Could it be happen before I'm done with this video and I won't know about it until I'm done? Could it be sometime between now and next week when the draft starts, or after the draft? That wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets addressed after the draft occurs. But you figure right now, as of right now, the Chargers, they have no starting quarterback because Phillip Rivers left. Patriots don't have a starting quarterback. They did sign for a second time Brian Hoyer. He was previously a backup to Brady a few years back. Brian Hoyer, we all know, if you know football, you know he's not a starting quarterback. It has been rumored that that the Patriots are expected to select a quarterback in the draft. There's supposedly like 2 or 3 different ones they're going after. But it's just a matter of you can't really determine which one, because you figure if they're going after this one, they're going to have to trade to get a lot higher to get him, versus if they're going after the other guy where they may only have to get to the middle of the draft. So, you know, it's depending on how they're feeling at this point. So that's that on there. Cincinnati is in a little bit of drama. They're actually going to kick off the draft. You figure right now they got the number 1 pick. Joe Burrow, he's been linked to Cincinnati from the very beginning, but he's basically being a modern day Eli that's saying, "Don't pick me. I'm not going to play for you." I'm not a fan of that. Like this league, these teams, these are basically setting up your future, giving you an opportunity. So what are you going to do if they play? What if they pick you? You're not going to play. You're not going to play in the NFL like a big boy because you don't want to play for the orange and black. Shut up. I don't like that. That's just me. It's an opportunity. If they draft you, play your 4 or 5 years. Don't re-sign with them. People will come after you if you're that good. That's just my feeling on it. But regardless, you figure they've got the number 1 pick. Burrow has been said from the start. That's who Cincinnati's going to go after. There has been saying that basically Cincinnati is going to trade out of the number 1 spot. They're going to trade down to either 3 or 5 and get another quarterback who they would be just as happy with. I've heard that in a few days. I've heard that they might draft the I'm going blank now. That edge, the big guy out of Ohio State, I think number 2. I've heard that rumor. I don't expect that to happen. He's expected to go to Washington. But again, there's stuff there. So the key thing is whatever Cincinnati opens up the night with is pretty much going to set the tone and can possibly throw people off. That's the main thing on there. And keep in mind, they still have Andy Dalton. Now this year, this is his last year on his contract. He's on there for $17.5 million, but they don't owe him anything. So if he's still on the roster as of June 1st, they're locked in for $17.5 million. At that point, okay, you kind of, I guess, play him and then just let him go next year. I think they'll probably wind up cutting him and create the space for the $17.5 million, and then you're free and clear of it, and then whatever the case may be. But again, the point is Cincinnati has a situation, and there's still some QB drama there. So going down here, it's just a few other spots, and I'll be out of here. And then just, again, let me know what you think about this. Devontae Freeman, he's still a free agent, okay? Now going through, if you're looking at teams, I was watching something on there. If you think about teams are a good fit, probably I think 3 places that would be good for Freeman. These are my personal opinion. Green Bay, okay? Now you could say, okay, well Green Bay, they've kind of have 2 running backs up there. All right, you have Jones and Williams, but they're not consistent, and that's the problem. They'll have games where you'll have a stretch where basically they're putting up 5, 6, 7 games in a row where they're having phenomenal games, or an above average, which is still a really good game. 85 yards or 130 yards rushing. And then out of nowhere, they'll be playing a team with a poor rush defense, maybe like Detroit or something, or whatever, bad example. But somebody where they should have a really good game, and they wind up getting 45 yards all night, and they can't, and they lose the game because they didn't show up on rushing. So there are those times when there's those inconsistencies. So Green Bay would be a good fit for him. Tampa Bay, that would be another good slot to fill in. Like I said, the running back there, we'll see. That'd be something good to have a nice little toy for Tom Brady. And then the other one would be the Rams. Again, you figure with the Rams, that's basically the only slot that hasn't been filled. You know what I mean? Because you figure if Gurley, he left the Rams to basically go to the Falcons, and the Falcons let go Devontae Freeman so they can take him, well, that slot is full. You know, they still have their number 2 there, but they don't have a true starter. So the Rams is what I'm thinking is probably the best case scenario for him, but we'll see. Jadeveon Clowney, everybody's still waiting to see what he's going to do. He was looking for something, I think, like 22 to 24 million per year, and nobody was biting on that. I know the Jets and I think 1 or 2 other teams made him an offer, but it was less than what he wanted, and so that's why he's still a free agent. And it came out he actually cut down his asking price. I think he brought down his asking price to like 17 to 19 million a year, and he's still sitting as a free agent. So I think it's just a matter of going to kind of get through the draft, see what goes on, and then, you know, he may not get signed until probably the middle part of May, when nobody's going to want him. Someone's probably going to, you know, try to steal him at like 15, 16 million a year, something like that. He's not going to get the money he's asking. That's why he's still there. Jameis Winston, that's going to be another curious one. You know what I mean? As far as it's sitting right now, he may not have a team this year. Again, he's just sitting out there. If no one's jumped on him at this point, there's really not a spot for you until somebody wants you. Cam Newton, I talked about him before. Essentially, he's on the Carolina Panthers right now on the trade block as a number 4 quarterback. So he's there, but, you know, that he could be something simply says here, I'll give you, you know, a 6th-round pick for him, just to kind of get rid of him and create this cap space because he's not playing. I just went over Andy Dalton and everything. And the other one on here, too, is Joe Flacco. This doesn't surprise me. Joe Flacco, in my opinion, I would put Joe Flacco in a similar, it's a little bit of a stretch, but definitely more severe. Joe Flacco is definitely overpaid and overrated. Now, again, I understand, yes, okay, fine. He got Baltimore a Super Bowl back when they played San Fran about, 7-8 years ago. I get that. But he's like an Alex Smith, I would say probably maybe a little less, maybe even less than that. Now, I'm only going to make that statement is because Andy Reid. Andy Reid turned Alex Smith into something when he was with Kansas City. But Joe Flacco, he's nothing spectacular. He's the ultimate game manager. That's all he is. He's never had big games. You figure probably if you look at his career, he probably averages 180 yards passing per game. He's nothing fantastic. You know, he had his neck surgery. That's why he was out last year. And the quarterback, which was the rookie, came in. He filled in. All right, Elway saw enough. Bye-bye, Joe. But, you know, at this point, I would say one of 3 things. Either one, he's going to retire, because at this point where his age is, I want to say he's about, 35, 36 maybe. So you figure Flacco is even going to retire. He's just going to sit back. He'll probably sign with the team to be a backup / mentor to a younger one, which I don't know how I feel about that because he doesn't have much to offer. Or 3, which is unlikely, once all the dust clears and settles, if he decides he really does still want to consider playing football, you know, because you get some of these athletes that really enjoy and want to play. You know, if next year or in 2 years from now, the XFL is back or comes around after they're coming clear of everything they're going through now, maybe that would be an outlet for him too. But I don't think there's much left for him in the NFL. So again, I'd be curious. You heard my thoughts on it. Next week, I'm going to have another video. You figure typically I go to MetLife and I'm live there when we're doing the draft party. Obviously, we're not going to have the draft party this year because of everything that is going on in the world. So probably I'm going to do something. I'm going to have a little party in my living room. Probably I don't know. I'm probably going to see if I can stream with one of my buddies who does all the football stuff with me. We'll maybe have some chicken, some beer, have him watching the party and everything with the draft live virtual for the first time. That's going to be a little bit weird. But that's going to come next week as we're going through here piece by piece, analyze the draft. Again, tell me your thoughts, what you think, anything different in terms of my take, input, what you thought about your teams doing right with everything on here. And then I've got one more. Now, obviously, you saw behind me, there was Zeke's jersey over to my left and then the Roethlisberger to the right. All right, in a minute, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to scoot over. You're going to see there's a third jersey behind me, okay? Now, for me, again, just for fun, useless information, this is a little bit of a trivia question. I'm curious if you guys can guess who the jersey is that is behind me. So I'm just going to kind of get up. I'll give you about 2 or 3 seconds to look at it, obviously before the video ends. But yeah, just let me know, all right? Talk to you guys soon. Come back for more.